I don't believe I did this type of reaction video last year to the NBA All-Star starters. I just did a dedicated video talking about Zach Lavine being selected to his first All-Star game, but after the All-Star starters were revealed last night on TNT, I had some thoughts. So in today's video, I'm going to be going over each of the NBA starters for the All-Star game, whether or not they deserve to be an All-Star starter or an All-Star period for that matter, and whether the fan voting, the player voting, and the media got this one right. So what's going on, everyone? You were listening to Bull Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Now, I did want to start by saying, and I've said this in the past on the channel, so apologies if this sounds a bit redundant, but I am not a fan of how the All-Star starters are selected to the All-Star game. Yes, it has improved from the day where it used to be 100% based on fan voting, and you had guys like Zaza Pachulia getting millions of votes, or Yao Ming being #1 in vote getting even when he was always injured. Now, more recently, they have introduced a weighted scale where it's a component of fan voting, the players in the league voting on their peers, and of course, the media. I'm still not a big fan of it, but it is what it is, so just wanted to throw that out there before we get into it. Now, in case you're not aware, the starters for each of the conferences are as follows. For the East, you had our boy DeMar DeRozan, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Joel Embiid, Kevin Durant, and Trae Young. And for the West, you had Nikola Jokic, LeBron James, John Morant, Steph Curry, and Andrew Wiggins. Yeah, I think you guys know where I'm going to be going with this as far as who I disagree should have been an All-Star starter. But we're going to start with the East because you know we have to start with DeMar DeRozan, our All-Star forward, except he's a guard on the All-Star ballot. Didn't really seem to make sense to me, but we'll take it because I think it's unlikely he would have been selected as an All-Star starter over Giannis, Embiid, and Kevin Durant. But look, DeMar deserves this. You know, after all the narratives around him, that he doesn't fit in today's NBA because he can't shoot threes, he can't space the floor, and the mid-range shot is a thing of the past in the NBA. It's why you had countless analysts calling this the worst offseason signing in the NBA. And DeMar even said it himself, he thrives off of that doubt and hate from the fans and the media. And after having not been an All-Star since 2018, his last season in Toronto, DeMar is having one of the best seasons of his career, and he's doing so in helping lead a Bulls team that didn't even make the play-in last year to being one of the best teams, one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference. That is going to get you into the All-Star game because becoming an All-Star, although yes, is based on individual performance, it is a big factor into being selected, but it's also how well your team is playing and the exposure you're getting on a national level. DeMar is putting up 26.4 points per game on insane efficiency, shooting 50% from the field, and he's even shooting a near career best from 3 at 33%. Who knew the guy would be able to do this at the age of 32 in his 13th season? Now, some of these that I'm going to go through a little more quickly, like the ones that are obviously deserving of being selected as a starter, and I don't think many people would disagree with them, being names like Giannis, Kevin Durant, Joel Embiid. I mean, yeah, all of these guys make sense to me. You could even argue that all three of these have legitimate cases to be league MVP with the level that they are playing at right now. I know Kevin Durant is injured, so he's likely going to get a replacement, and because he's gotten injured, that likely has ended his chances at winning an MVP. But if you look at the body of work all three of these players have been able to do so far this season, you could say they're probably the best three players in the league right now. Joel Embiid is absolutely balling as of late, averaging over like 35 points per game in his last 10 games. And without Ben Simmons, Embiid has really been carrying the Sixers team and putting them in a good position to still make a deep run in the playoffs. Giannis got off to a slower start when the season kicked off, but has since looked like his MVP self. So yeah, I don't take any issues with those three being selected as the East starters in the front court. Now, Trae Young. I'm not saying it's unfounded to have him as an all-star starter because yes, the guy is playing very well. He's having one of the best seasons in his young career. He's currently 5th in the league in scoring, 3rd in the league in assists, and he's been the most efficient he's been in his career with a PER of 25.2. Like, yes, he should be an all-star. But this team, the team that he plays for, is pretty bad right now. This is coming after the Cinderella story where they went to the Eastern Conference Finals last year. And now they're looking outside of the play-in spot, currently tied for 11th in the East. They are on a 5-game winning streak, so they're picking things up a bit. But I don't know. I'm sure it's because I'm a bit biased. But how are you going to vote Trae Young as an all-star starter over Zach Lavine? Like, sure, Zach isn't putting up as great of scoring numbers as Trae Young is, or passing numbers for that matter, but he's been much more efficient than Trae Young is from the field. He's turning the ball over considerably less than Young is, and more importantly, Zach's team is winning. Now, I know a lot of people will say, well, that's because Zach has help and Trae Young doesn't. Like, come on now. First, it was the guy didn't have enough help, and now he has too much help, so he doesn't get the nod over Trae Young. And it's not like the Hawks have a trash team outside of Young. Like, this is still a talented team, like I said, that just went to the Eastern Conference last season. Anyway, like I said, it's probably because I'm a little biased. Yes, I am. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. Zach Lavine is going to be selected as an all-star reserve. There's no doubt in my mind about that. And again, it's why I take issue with the fan voting, because then it sort of becomes a popularity contest. Now, let's go over the Western Conference, because I think what's interesting about this lineup of 5 guys is that it is becoming clear how much the balance of power and talent has shifted towards the Eastern Conference, which was always seen as the weaker conference in the NBA. Like I said, arguably you have the top 3 players in the league, all in the East. But in any event, I'll start in the front court where you have Nikola Jokic, the reigning MVP. I take no issues with that. He's by far and away the best center in the Western Conference, and right there with Joel Embiid is the best center in the league. Then you have LeBron James, which I know some people are going to take issue with, especially Bulls fans, because a lot of Bulls fans hate LeBron James. But come on now. The guy is still balling like he's in his mid-20s and straight up carrying the Lakers team at the age of 37. Now, the Lakers aren't doing that well, and I think that's what most people will probably get to take issue with, is because why are we even giving LeBron a starter spot when the Lakers are barely able to stay at 500 and clinging on to the bottom of the playoffs in the Western Conference? Well, LeBron is second in the league in scoring. He's averaging 29 points per game, shooting 52% from the field, taking the most threes in his entire career at 7.9 attempts per game, and still shooting it at 35% for a guy who has never been known for shooting threes all that well. He's still been able to play great defense at this stage in his career. He's blocking shots at the highest rate that he's ever had since he was 23 years old, averaging more steals per game since he was 30 years old. Like, the guy still deserves to be an all-star starter. Also, when you see who else was selected and the level of competition for front court players in the West, yeah, LeBron is going to be a starter. And that leads me to the final front court player, and that's Andrew Wiggins. Andrew Wiggins was voted to start in the NBA All-Star game. Like, don't get me wrong, Wiggins is actually playing well this year, and he's on one of the best teams in the league, which helps your chances in getting selected. But an all-star starter, like, I'm fine with him being a reserve. But even if that is a bit generous, like, Wiggins, for what he's been able to do this season, is a fringe all-star player who is kind of right on the bubble, where he could get snubbed, but if he made it, you'd be like, okay, I guess that's all right. But a guy who is averaging 18.1 points per game, 4.2 rebounds, 2 assists, shooting 48% from the field, and a PER of 16.2. That's an all-star starter-worthy performance? Like, come on now, what is this coming to, right? I mean, part of the issue is the NBA has to get rid of the whole front court versus back court selections. Like, it should just be the best players for each conference, regardless of position, because when you look at other forwards in the West, you have guys like Anthony Davis, Paul George, Draymond Green. I mean, because of injuries to Anthony Davis and Paul George, yeah, it's a bit tougher of a case for them to make it over Wiggins, probably getting voted in, but come on. You have Andrew Wiggins starting ahead of guys like Luka Doncic, Devin Booker, Chris Paul, Donovan Mitchell. I know they're all guards, again, why I take issue with the position voting, especially when everyone talks about how today's NBA is positionless basketball. And even Karl Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert, also centers, but all of these players that I just mentioned are better than Andrew Wiggins and have been putting up better performances this season as a result. Now, I'll stop ranting about Wiggins. Let's start talking about the guard spots, which neither of these I take issue with. Ja Morant, I mean, how can you not include him into the all-star starter list? The dude has been dominating and carrying the Grizzlies to one of the best teams in the league, who went on an 11-game winning streak most recently. Ja is another guy who has a legitimate case for MVP consideration. And then, of course, Steph Curry, still one of the best players in the league, and his team is also one of the best teams in the league. What I will say, though, about Steph is that I don't quite understand the narrative that he's an MVP candidate. Like, yes, I get it. He's the best player on one of the best teams in the league. But if you actually look at Steph's numbers, he's not playing all that well. Like, it's being overshadowed by the fact that the Warriors are winning again, and he passed Ray Allen on the all-time three-point list. But Steph currently has one of the lowest player efficiency ratings since his 4th season in the NBA at 21.5. Obviously, he's still scoring machine, averaging 25 points per game, but he's doing so only shooting 41% from the field and 37% from 3, which is the lowest Steph has shot from deep in his career if you exclude that 2019 season in which he only played 5 games. I'm not saying that, Steph has lost a step or that he's on the decline. Like, clearly that isn't the case. I'm just not sure he is a legitimate MVP candidate when he's having arguably one of the worst seasons of his career since his 4th year in the league, which granted is still a great season because he's Steph Curry and it's still an all-star worthy level performance. I just don't know why some people would think that he's a surefire MVP candidate. Now, as for those that were snubbed from being an all-star starter, I mean, not that it really matters because anyone who was snubbed as a starter is likely still going to be an all-star reserve. But obviously, I think Zach Lavine was a clear snub for being a starter, especially over someone like Trae Young. Seeing Luka and Devin Booker not be starters, but Andrew Wiggins be one is an absolute joke in my opinion. But really, outside of those guys, I think the fans, players, and the media got this right. But I want to know what your guys' reactions, though, were to the All-Star voting. You let me know in the comments. Don't forget that the Bulls will also be taking on the Spurs in San Antonio later tonight. I'll have a live chat for that game, both here on the channel as well as on the Discord, so be sure to join that. And as always, guys, be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan, as I do post daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and I will catch you in the next one.